Hello, everyone. Let's just give it a couple of minutes for the rest to join in. And maybe at 10:01 or 10:02, then we can start the session. Okay. I think we still have like around 50 people who have signed in, but maybe we'll just wait for another couple of minutes then before we can start. Be one more minute, I think. Then we can start at 10:02. All right, maybe we can start now. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you for making the time to be with us here today. My name is Ali from Bursa Malaysia, as part of the PLC transformation program. I know it's a bit we are having the session on a Thursday, so hope everyone's a bit more refreshed. Weekend it's almost there, so we can have our break then. We're very lucky to have with us here today Ridhima Khanduja, a market leader from Kincentric Malaysia. But before we talk about the topic about the rewards or the webinar for today, maybe I'll do a quick recap about the PLC transformation program. As everyone is aware, the PLC transformation program is a program that Bursa Malaysia initiated that was launched in March 2022. We've had with us, we've published 5 guidebooks since. And one of the guidebooks, the 5th guidebook, talked about the nation building. And under nation building, there is a topic which covers about future readiness, well-being, and inclusion of talent. And the subtopic of that is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're very lucky to have us here today, Ms. Ridhima, who is a market leader who leads Kincentric business for Malaysia as the country head. She brings along with her over 15 years of consulting and line management experience. Prior to joining Kincentric as part of the strategic acquisition between Spencer Stuart and Aon, Ridhima has with Aon more than 8 years and has worked in multiple geographies across the region, including Singapore, Brunei, Vietnam, and Philippines. Prior to joining Aon, she has worked with organizations such as PwC, ECS Limited, and HCL Technologies in India. Ridhima has been enabling organizations to deliver their business outcomes through effective people interventions across diverse areas of employee engagement and organization culture, capability framework design and development, and HR effectiveness review and improvements in various industries, such as financial services, telecom, and manufacturing. So I think it's already 10:04, and I don't want to take up too much time. Ridhima, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ali. I think it's a pleasure to be in the call today. So I'm very, very excited to talk about this emerging topic, I would say, that's been in our mind for some time. So I think let me just begin the journey by giving a very quick introduction to the organization I represent today. So Kincentric, if some of you are aware, we are a subsidiary company of an organization called Spencer Stuart. Spencer Stuart globally has been in multiple countries, over 60 offices across 30 countries, over 50 years, primarily focusing on leadership solutions, so helping organizations at board levels, at C-suite levels, to drive some of the critical people agenda through CEO succession, etc. However, in 2019, the Spencer Stuart family decided to expand its family by acquiring a significant chunk of Aon Consulting, which included solutions like culture and engagement, change, leadership, as well as HRTA. So the role that Kincentric brings is focusing on some of these solutions, and specifically, as Ali mentioned, I'm bestowed upon the honor and responsibility of taking care of the Malaysia office for the last 3 years and supporting the team here. So I think today's topic is so interesting, but before we get into this whole inclusion, maybe I ask the question back to you. And I think over the last 3 years, spending time online on these webinars, we all know what to do when we see a QR code. So I hope everybody on the call here can take out their phones, or if you are online, then maybe you want to type into menti.com. And that's the code that's there in front of you, 83948897. The question that you will see there is what comes to your mind when you hear the word inclusion. So what do you think of? We read so much about it, but just let me see where the audience starting from. I can see 7 people, 10 people close to already walking into Menti. If you are having any issues, feel free to write in the Q&A section. More than happy to help. Okay, we are coming close to 20, 21, 22, moving fast. So very nice. Yeah, keep your Menti on. There will be a few more times. I would love to hear your thoughts. So there are a few more questions we've planned to make sure this session is as interactive as possible. We are moving on to close to 40 people. Let's get at least 40 odd people. My colleague John is helping me through navigating the webinar today. So he's going to move us to the answers very soon. John, very nicely, we are seeing 45 people. Okay, so how do we define inclusion in your organization? Let's see what responses people give us. Equitable, fair. Open dialogue, very, very nice. No one being left out, amazing. Okay, let's have more people. We have 40 plus people. Would love to see what comes out as a psychological safety, so relevant. Holistic, okay. Embraces diversity, involvement, equal. So a lot of openness theme is emerging. Yeah. People diversity, I think diversity, transparency, to involve everybody as a team, making everybody feel included. So I think it's all about the impact, right? Not really what we think. Get a few more. John, would you move us down the screen? Yeah, I think there are a few more coming through. Being counted part of team, comprehensive transparency, supporting and agreeing to different viewpoints, embracing diversity, include all in all aspects, to act of including everyone. Okay, getting some nice responses. Let's wait for another maybe 30 more seconds and see where do we land. Anybody else wants to share their opinion? Creating and valuing, value created, okay, creating and sharing values. A lot around transparency seems to be the topic. A lot around diversity, so that's interesting. Yeah. So maybe move a bit further down. I think there are a few more responses that have emerged. Everyone gets a chance to be heard. Practice and policy of providing equal access, integrating all people, avoiding educational background, assuming it's biased, but yeah, very relevant. We have all kind of biases, conscious and unconscious. Equal respect. Yeah. I think we've got fair response, John. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, I think this is an amazing start, and this is where we wanted to start off with, is to be on the same page, which is where we actually start demystifying this word inclusion. So John, next slide for me. Yeah, thanks. So I think we've been all hearing terms like D&I. So we thought, let's start with the basics first. So based on a very extensive research by the Kincentric team, we want to define the word diversity, equity, and inclusion in three very simple terms. Firstly, when it comes to the word diversity, it is about composition. Composition would mean demographics, male, female. We are talking about races. We are talking about people coming from different backgrounds, economic backgrounds. So whenever we talk about number of people or a percentage of people representation, that would define diversity. Second comes this perception of equity that comes in. I think some of you, when we were asking that question of inclusion, also mentioned about fairness or equal treatment and how you do about that. I think this year's, especially if you remember, the Women's Day theme was all about equity. It was about creating fairness among how people are treated, and a lot around how people are given opportunities in their own workspaces. So that's usually when it comes beyond just the diversity of numbers. Are they treated fairly and equitably in their own setup through opportunities, through promotions, through pay equity, through various other things people see in organizations as opportunities and benefits, is where the element of equity comes into action. Then taking a third step, which is where we'll spend a lot more time today, is the element of inclusion. So the focus on inclusion is not so much about demographics anymore. It's not so much about what do we give to them, but it's actually about the final feeling that the person gets. So what is that final environment that we create for people is defined in the term inclusion. And a lot of it, actually, the D and the E contributes towards the inclusion, but that's not what it all constitutes towards. So when we talk about inclusion, there are four key elements of inclusion we need to keep in mind. One, when people feel that they are being valued for their contribution. So if I feel that, yes, I gave an opinion, I got respected, people heard me out, that's something that is part of inclusion, that I feel included in the organization discussion. Second is that people feel that when they express their opinion, they have the right to speak up. So there's been a lot of conversations I hear in a multitude of clients that I work with very closely. This conversation is coming up. There are companies who are driving campaigns around speak up culture. Why are they doing it? Because they understand that if I do not have an environment where people are fair and open to express their ideas, then how will we drive innovation? How will we challenge the status quo? How will we change the way we do things? All organizations understand the importance of changing things, but the culture to change things comes from the from very much from the point of where do we start questioning things, which is where if people feel they have a voice, then the inclusion in that organization is high. So one, I feel that my contribution matters. Second, I'm comfortable to provide my contribution. Third would move into, yes, my contribution matters, I can speak up, but do people care? Is my thoughts even taken into consideration in decision making? Or I just keep giving my feedback and actually nobody cares now? So that's the decision making influence, that the person in context feels that it's not so much purely a top-down decision making, but it's an inclusive decision making environment that the organization has created. And then comes the last, which is a very interesting part of inclusion. If I feel included, then I will feel motivated to perform at my best. Because if I just feel that I've been told what to be done and and my opinion doesn't matter, then it is very much possible that I don't care beyond just doing my part. So if an employee and us as colleagues feel that we want to contribute our best, then the first three steps must make sense for us. So a comprehensive understanding of inclusion hence goes way beyond just the basics of diversity in terms of demographics, and second of equity, which is about fairness of opportunities and all of those benefits that one gets. It takes a level higher when it comes to inclusion. It's the final experience that we talk about. So then the question comes, how are we doing? So do people feel included today? Do we feel that where do we stand? So based on a very recent study, and this is right off the press, we've just launched this report globally in Kincentric actually 2 weeks back. And we get to hear from multitude of employees across the globe. So just to give you an idea and the amount of data that goes behind it is that there is more than few millions of employee data that Kincentric collects through our employee engagement solutions. And this study also cut across APAC, cut across Europe, cut across US. And when we saw this, 73% of the employees told us that in the last 12 months, they felt excluded at some point. And when we asked those employees what was their definition of exclusion, it was they felt that either they felt singled out, so maybe they were pointed out as an individual that you don't know or you are being dismissed somewhere. They felt devalued. So 50% of them felt devalued almost, which means that they said something, but their input was dismissed again. And then 30% of them didn't just felt that their input was devalued, they felt they were penalized for speaking up, which is quite a large number when we're talking about a global landscape, right? I'm sure some of you want to ask that question to me, that so what does it look like for Malaysia? Because we're all responsible here sitting out of Malaysia, right? Actually, the scenario is no better. Even when we do, and Kincentric has the expertise and fortune of working with a lot of government-linked organizations, around almost 70, 80 companies, Kincentric helps on running employee engagement solutions every year. In our database, it tells us that while perception of diversity is actually not so bad, we are almost 70, 75% of the times when we run these surveys, employees tell us that they do feel that we are open to people from different backgrounds, different diversity is allowed here in terms of composition of people. However, when the moment we ask that, are you comfortable to speak up, or do you feel when you speak up, your inputs are valued, the scores actually drop significantly to usually not beyond 50, 55%. So very much aligned to the global trend of perception of inclusion, even within home. At Malaysia, our numbers are not what is very much optimally you would want to see. So 73% of the employees told us that they experienced exclusion. Then we also asked that, is it just you, or do you feel other people also experience it? Because that's also a question of environment, right? So then in the same angle, when we asked that question, 63% of the people did say that it's not just them, but they also see somebody else going through a very similar experience. So hence it tells us that it's reasonably pervasive in our society, in our workspaces today, that we are not really up to the mark of creating an environment of inclusion, which contributes very, very strongly in the culture of innovation, in the culture of growth, the growth mindset. So all the good things we want to do in our culture transformation is at the foundation about creating a culture of inclusion. And hence it's extremely important to invest on this. And I'm so glad Bursa took this up into the whole PLCT program and then helped us organize this webinar to at least create some awareness around it. Now, when we get into the answers of how to move forward, there are three primary pillars. First is the organizational leadership. So the journey of transforming inclusion in an organization starts from the top management, starts from the leadership, the senior leadership in the organization. Second is, once we have a fair amount of appropriate leadership direction, skills, abilities there, the second element comes in, how do we create a culture that everybody feels that there is a culture of inclusion? And then the third element is making sure this culture is delivered through the right employee experience. Because culture is just the environment, right? It's the beliefs, it's the value system we all stand for. So three primary pillars: having an inclusive leader, making sure that our culture is also inclusive enough. And then the third would come in making sure that our experiences that people feel on an everyday basis in meetings, in in hiring, in promotions, in conversations with their manager. It is all inclusive of everyday inclusion that they would want to be experiencing as. So in the next 30 odd minutes, I will try and navigate you through each of these pillars one by one and see what are some of the take points that we can take it back to our organizations and help them to improve. So let's go into the first one, which is the inclusive leadership first. So let's see, where do we stand today on inclusive leadership? So in order to define inclusive leadership, let's take two extremes. So an inclusive leader is a leader who's very much involved in making sure that he takes ownership of demonstrating the right open environment, demonstrates irrespective of what level he's interacting with, he would come across or she would come across as who's very open to new ideas, it allows for people to be recognized for diversity of thought, and that's a credible leader. Then there are environments where we call as performative environments. Performative environments would mean, as if we are talking about when we say, right, just talk only, no do. Just performance. It's like a drama. So people only say good things, but actually don't deliver. So in those organizations, while senior leaders will talk the right things, but people don't see sincere action. Their actions don't match the words that they talk about. So that's performative environment. And very much there, they would usually not show, they will not take action against people when they are not being felt included, or somebody is not taking an appropriate action there. So let's see how good or bad it is. So in organizations, generally in our data, we see that we see 75% of the employees, when they see their boss or their senior leaders as demonstrating the right inclusive environment, that's how strong they will feel that the culture is inclusive. So just if the boss is inclusive, the employees will rate the culture inclusive, 75%, which is very, very high. On the reverse, when they rate the boss low, they only 3% chance that the culture of the organization can be inclusive. So the importance of the boss is very, very critical. So hence, a culture transformation journey should always start from the top, not from the bottom. So all the audience here, my humble request, I'm sure there is so many organizations you're representing here who are talking about culture transformation, but be mindful, culture transformation will start from the top. And that's what it talks about here as well, that if employees rate the leadership positive, there is 75% chance they will rate the organizational culture positive on inclusion. And same goes when they rate the leadership positive, there is 80% chance they will rate their manager also positive. That means the culture of inclusion cascades down, because as managers, as your supervisors, they all emulate the senior leadership. They will follow up. So when they follow up, then they will feel that, okay, it's quite there. However, when they will rate the leaders low, very high probability they will rate the managers also very low on this area. They will usually rate the people managers insincere about driving some of these culture initiatives on inclusion in the organization. So the critical pillar of making an inclusive organization starts from the leadership. And how do leadership see themselves? So there are three issues that we found in our data that we need to work upon. One, actually senior leaders think that they are actually doing pretty well. So none of them, or actually almost when we ask the employees, let's say 20% of the or let's say 80% of the employees say that they saw an act of exclusion in the organization. Senior leaders will tell us that only 40% of them saw. So what they think that we are creating a very inclusive organization, and they don't feel that we are excluding anybody. However, the rest of the organization is really feeling the difference. So employees versus senior leadership, there is a big perception gap, almost a double perception gap. Most of the top management they feel that we are very included. And among themselves, they feel that we are very open to different ideas, but their subordinates don't feel the same about them. So there is a big gap between the top leadership thought process versus the subordinate perception of the top leadership on the behaviors related to inclusion. And what are the behaviors related to inclusion? We go back to the first stage, which is that I feel valued, my opinions matter, I am involved in decision making, and I feel that I can contribute to my best. So those 4 behaviors, when being asked or on perception by top management versus the rest, there is almost a double of a difference. And hence they don't feel there is a need to fix it. So we would need to really work upon some of these things to make sure there is a strong awareness at the top and their perception is corrected for as we go about driving inclusion in the organization. Okay. Okay, so I think there is a question in the chat. Maybe I'll just take. Sorry.
That's Ridhima. Yeah, I was just about to jump in for a bit. Before I read out the questions, let me just put it as answer live. Just a bit of a note to all our viewers. We have disabled the chat function because we want to make sure the session goes along uninterrupted. But do feel free to write in your questions as we go along with this webinar. We want to make the session as interactive as possible. And Ridhima, as she just did, is more than happy to answer questions as she does along with the presentation. So Ridhima, thank you for noticing. And I'll read out the question. With regards to this person, I think he or she was in the HR and is asking a question. In HR, we do a lot of engagement with other business functions. How can we help the people we engage to speak up and feel inclusive? Some of them have fear of speaking up due to relationship with their direct reports.
Thank you so much, Ali. I think it's a very important thought. I think what we can do is actually start with the manager skills. There has been a lot of interventions that we are seeing organizations putting in changing, because it's a top-down journey. So the leaders and the managers need to create an environment that people feel free to speak up. Today, there is a fear of consequence. There is a fear of being belittled or dismissed that we are seeing in our organization. The way to help it is actually helping the managers and the leaders. Help the managers, train your managers on being patient in their persona, not reacting too fast. So those are the things that you can do to help the managers. Naturally, the culture will step up. And managers, as I said, let's start from the top. I think maybe, John, we move to the next slide. We'll come back to the mentee in a while. So I think based on what we did research upon and our experience in driving some of these initiatives, we have 3 C's for you for easy reference. 1, provide clarity to the leaders and the managers. Hence, use a lot more data. I think it's like just now when we started our session, we try to demystify the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, because they all have different actions to drive. So here we are talking about inclusion. Let us not be very happy about purely by looking at, oh, we have these many women and these many men. It's not just about having numbers right. It is going beyond those numbers and utilizing those numbers to drive business impact. So hence provide clarity, educate your leadership to understand. Take a lot more data. So like the data that I just represented to you, I'm sure you can also curate that data just for your organization and then use it to drive some ownership around it. Second, as the second word says, drive commitment. It will not happen suddenly, but it can be leader-led through some specific behaviors that we can train them to educate upon and start emulating. Then the third pillar is about having the courage. We need to help leaders to be comfortable to call out when somebody else does wrong. And this we've seen very well demonstrated in some organizations versus others. Because what happens sometimes is in leadership teams or in manager meetings, one person said something that was really not right. Or let's say there was a management meeting going on, a younger team member is presenting and he has an opinion. What happens is the senior leader dismisses the person and everybody else is just watching. None of us actually call that behavior out. And what happens? This person goes back and tells them, like, in no point presenting, there are no point saying anything, they will dismiss. So what happened? The culture already got lost. Instead of that, it is important that when actions like these happen, we as senior leaders, if you are one of those here today standing in, or if you are training your senior leaders, tell them they need to call out these bad behaviors. Because if we don't call out these bad behaviors, it becomes pervasive. It becomes okay to dismiss people. It becomes okay to be rude, which then becomes part of the culture already. So 3 things: provide them clarity. So first, educate them. Second, take commitment from them that it's not a one-off journey. It's going to be something that we all have to continue to do. And third, please have the courage to call out non-inclusive behaviors, because the stick as well as the carrot has to go side by side to drive a positive culture in your organization. So let's move on to the next pillar, which is about culture. So getting deep dive into the culture of inclusion here. So what did we learn here? So when let's try and define what is an inclusive culture versus a derailer culture or an exclusion culture. In an inclusive culture, very often the conversation would be around psychological safety, comfort of speaking up, having a fair environment where everybody has access to opportunities and there is a collaborative setup. Sometimes some people would say that it is inclusion there is also derailer culture that kind of hampers the inclusion culture. And that culture is sometimes the illusion of meritocracy. This one, I would really want my audience to be a bit more patient with me on. Because sometimes we say, but we have to be fair, right? This one performed and then I must give it to them. So there is a perception that if we just be merit-based, then we are being inclusion about. But no, inclusion is when somebody is starting from a slightly step back scenario. So here we actually have to create an environment that the one who is behind comes to an equitable place to then speak up. So hence a purist, sometimes we as organization, we want to hide behind saying that, oh, but nobody from that background or that culture actually came up in the top list, and hence we cannot give it to them, right? So because we don't want to be unfair to the ones who are performing just because they come from this background. But you have to understand that did we actually create that environment for the ones who are not there to be present? If our starting point was much behind, of course, we will not have the final outcome. So purely depending upon meritocracy as a shelter might not help the organization. Sometimes we also have affinity biases. Affinity biases comes like if I feel that people who talk very loudly or very aggressive, they are better performers. So that's an affinity bias, that I like those kind of people, or an affinity towards my kind of people in terms of my persona, my way of doing things. People who want to stay in office till 2 a.m. to finish up, or 12 in the night, or this one very committed, always stay late one. But you have to understand that's your bias. That's how you saw things going. So in order for us to move forward, it's necessary that we dismiss some of these biases, which includes meritocracy, affinity, fear of conformity, that everybody is a yes man around me or a yes person around me. And then some of these elements create a not so inclusive environment. Today, based on our research, it tells us that 40% of our employees tell us they are in a non-inclusive environment. And what does that non-inclusive environment constitute of? John, could you take me to the next slide? Thanks. It constitutes of these 5 elements. One, what supports inclusion and what derails inclusion. What supports inclusion is fair and impartial treatment. So 36% of our employees that we did this research with told us that they feel that we get fair and impartial, but 44% feel that there is bias in the system. 20% are neutral, so they are somewhere in the middle. 36% of them feel that there is fair opportunity. 46% feel that there is a shelter of meritocracy, which is what I was referring earlier. 39% of our employees feel there is psychological safety. That means I can speak up without any fear. I feel that I'm in a safe environment. I won't be treated in a misconduct way. Vis-a-vis 39% of the people, there is a fear, so they will just agree on whatever it is because they don't feel comfortable to speak up. Again, similar patterns across these 5 elements, you can see there's a general 40 odd percent, or sometimes a bit higher, up till 46% of people who feel different behaviors of non-inclusive culture, like being pushed down or silenced in a room, or there is no chance to negotiate or find a win-win solution. It's my way or the highway. Those kind of conversations are almost 40-45% of our employees are feeling that. There is a middle 20% who are neutral. They are not really seeing any strong side. And there is the positive 30-35% across the 5 elements, from fairness to opportunities to psychological safety to comfort of speaking up to where we feel that we can curate an answer rather than just being told one, is where the current culture stands. Now, in order to make it better, let's see what can we do. So I think the starting point of all of this is taking the guesswork out of this. So don't assume we do right or wrong. We saw leaders already assume they're doing very good, right? But unless and until there is data on the table, how do we defend it? So first thing first, I think it's important to assess where does the various section of employees feel about all these derailers in the inclusive culture, and are there pockets which are more of this type, or is it a pervasive setup that you are driving on? And be mindful, investment in inclusion is not purely for good to have. It is all contributing towards your culture and your business outcomes of innovation and growth. Because if they don't feel included, they will not perform at their best. And especially so in the emerging Gen Z population. The second element is, after we assess, it's act. Inclusion is again not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing journey that we continuously need to keep an eye from our various experiences, and more likely it will help the organization outcomes. Lastly, it is not a straight line graph. I often say culture transformation is like an up and down journey. We make some successes, we have some setbacks, but till the point the trajectory is moving in an upward journey, we should embrace our failures sometimes and use that opportunity to adapt our approach. When we adapt some of these approaches in culture transformation, we often say there are 3 key pillars that we will need to watch out for. People behaviors, which is your leadership and managers, your critical talent employee demographics. So make sure the approach that you are putting in place is differentiated for different employee groups. So depending upon the younger to the legacy employees to the people in different departments, divisions. And thirdly is the whole experience around the processes that they are being. So all of these 3 touch points have to work together to deliver a positive culture into the organization. From here on, assess, act, adapt could be a very easy reference that you can sometime leverage upon. Let's move to the third pillar, unless there is any question. Ali, do we have any questions in our Q&A?
No, we don't have any.
Not yet? Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. Let's go on then. So let's move to the third pillar. I think this is, again, focusing a lot more on our people experiences. So when we look at some of our data around people experiences, it starts off by saying that teams who tend to have a more inclusive environment, they will perform better. To the point, when we did our research, we found out that there is almost 4 times more chance, and you can all see the data on the right, you can see that when teams who are more inclusive, who rate higher on those few elements of being able to contribute, being able to speak up and all of that, they will rate that we are able to contribute in decision making 95% time. So people who rate that high, they feel they can contribute in decision making. Vis-a-vis non-inclusive environment, only 25% of them feel they can contribute in decision making. So almost a 4 times difference. Second, we also saw that if we talk about collaborative solutions, we often say, why are you waiting for me to give the answer? Why don't we come up around it together? Again, almost a 3 times variance between an inclusive and non-inclusive environment. Safe space to speak up and contribute towards the organization. Again, a 4 times variance between an inclusive versus a non-inclusive environment. So generally, when there is people rate higher on those inclusive behaviors, they will feel to contribute more, they will collaborate better, they will create, they feel a better sense of belonging towards the organization, which of course tends to drive greater impact and ownership in the organization for them to stay. So they will tend to retain much higher, they will not leave you, because a lot of younger employees tend to leave because they don't feel their opinions matter. So this will help organization in retention as well. And they will, of course, take greater ownership of business results. John, let's move to the next one. One more, John. Next slide. Yeah. So I think as we think about some of these interventions, we see this whole exercise to be again in a 3-step process. We love the 3s that we have, and it's all about starting to ask the right questions from people. You need to know where the experience is breaking down. As we go about understanding where are these experiences, to collect a lot more information through your team meetings, through your one-to-one conversations, through surveys. So all of these inputs come together for us to understand where do we stand today. Second, help the leaders across the board. The first Q&A question that we saw is, how can we help? Please help them through specific behaviors that they can demonstrate. What are the watch outs of an inclusive leader versus not so inclusive leader? Help them with education and training for them to demonstrate it. And then thirdly is about recognizing some of those rightful behaviors. So that would come under support, and make this a more systematic or a programmatic change you are driving towards. It's not about launching one-off training in the organization or a one-off campaign and you assume everybody will be able to pick up. In our experience, we work with large banks who are driving inclusive behaviors. It's a programmatic 2 to 3 year journey that has been established. And the journey is covering processes, it's covering people leaders, it's covering campaigns. So it's complementing each other in a very systematic, programmatic way, because creating inclusion in the organization is not one person's responsibility, but it's a journey of cultural transformation. So let's see this in a more consistent manner. Maybe I'll take a pause here and hear from anybody who wants to ask a question or give an opinion.
Hi, Ridhima, Ali here again. I think there's a question here by one of the anonymous attendees. Let me just click yes to answer this live. In being inclusive, how can leaders manage the different demographics, in particular the age groups? Recently, being inclusive means ensuring the younger or lower ranks to feel that they belong. I think, yeah, that's what has been alluded to earlier. Will this affect the older / higher ranks?
Okay, so I think based on our various researches that we've done, there is definitely different needs of different demographics. I think while everybody wants an inclusion culture, but the expectation is very different. So The younger employees, and I'll just take the example that was asked in the question, the younger employees have a greater expectation of inclusion vis-a-vis the generations that have come before that. They in the previous generation, inclusion was a good to have thing. As a professional who's been measuring employee engagement and employee opinions for the last 15 years, these questions were always in the survey. And if I have some of my HR colleagues in the call here, I'm sure they will kind of support me in it. We always used to ask these kind of questions, but it did not matter to people that much. Even if they don't get an environment, they can speak up. They will just say, no, I'll just come and do. And they still had ownership of the company, but for different reasons. For the younger employees, this is one of the most important reasons that they have ownership about the company. If they don't get it, it's a deal breaker for them. So hence, unfortunately, we will have to double down our efforts to a bit more when it comes to younger employees, because their expectation is higher. I think if we tend to do similar for the people who've been around with us longer and have all the experience, it doesn't mean that they will feel disengaged, right? We just need to make them part of the journey. Sometimes they will not value it as much because it's not their need. Their need is something else. So they might not appreciate it that much, but we need to make sure that we bridge these barriers, because these elder colleagues of ours or who've been there longer with us from a generational perspective, they bring a lot more experience that can be used by the younger employees also. So we need to help to create those bridges, but clearly the expectation is much higher for our Gen Zs. It is becoming, in some of the clients that we work, it is becoming the #1 factor of employee engagement. If we can't fix this, all our pay, career, growth, all comes later. So the perception of inclusion, and specifically inclusion, not just diversity, perception of inclusion, and secondly is the transparency of communication by senior leadership, are emerging as the top 2 factors of employee engagement in our Gen Zs, which is not the same for other employee groups. So we will have to double down our efforts on that group, especially if your company has a lot of those, which I'm assuming a lot of large organizations will continue to expand their employee base in this category. Okay. Any other questions people want to ask on our Q&A? There's a lot more that is available actually for you to give your or read about. There is a full 30-page report actually that's been published on Kincentric website regarding the inclusion efforts. There is recently, we are also launching our global employee engagement results. So how some of these data points that I spoke about of generational gaps are pretty much reflective in some of these reports. And so there are quite a few inputs. Feel free to jump in and enjoy the read. There are short versions, long versions, depending upon what you prefer as an individual. Any other questions? Yeah, I think we have one more. Can we have the link to the report? Absolutely.
Yes, I think after this session, we'll share across with all the viewers a link to this Kincentric report. Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another question. How to make defensive leaders to practice inclusion in the organization? I am facing this difficulty. Basically saying that the people there are a bit conventional in a way.
Yeah. I think the challenge is very real. Our best way that we've learned is using data. You have to show them why it is important and where is what is the repercussion of it. Because some of these traditional or conventional leaders, everybody wants good business. So everybody will feel that if it helps the business, then I will do. generally, as in I hope that is at least alignment on that purpose. So I would say start from there, use data, make it very, very apparent from them. And sometimes based on our experience, for some of these individuals, I think the journey is more individual than group. I often tell them that at home, your kids have started asking you questions and you are happy to answer. No? All kids in the at home now, from the generation, the younger ones, even a 5-year-old one can ask so many questions, and parents, grandparents are very happy to respond. However, when it comes to employees, there is still the baggage of the culture that the way the leaders grew up with. We have changed our culture of inclusion at home, but not in office. We are still bringing in our previous office cultures back to office. So I think I would start the journey one-to-one from some of these leaders, because you have to give them that confidence and comfort at an individual coaching level sometimes, if there is strong resistance, rather than making them feel awkward sometimes in a group setting, because they have done what they've done, they've contributed, they've performed. It's just a new challenge and they feel defensive or not so comfortable to pick up. So number one, the CEO must be supportive. So he or she needs to be behind you. Second, try and make it individual journey rather than a forceful group journey that everybody needs to change at one time.
Thanks, Ridhima. Next question is, in Kincentric's analysis, is there a particular sector that stands out when it comes to being inclusive?
Interestingly, none. I thought so. I thought when we were doing the analysis, I thought the journey will be probably manufacturing, maybe more traditional, maybe the banks and the technology will be better. Not really. People are people. There is a very marginal difference of 2 to 3% that we are seeing from an industry context in inclusion. General engagement, there's a fair difference. Like usually the hotels will rate up higher versus the manufacturing usually is a bit lower on that. Banks are somewhere in the middle. So there's a bit more diversity in engagement, but inclusion, interestingly, it is we've not found our solutions as yet. I think there's a lot more work.
Yep, understand. So maybe in a way that, as you rightly mentioned, when it comes to inclusiveness, everyone is still just starting out and trying to have more emphasis on how they navigate through and making sure that staff are being more inclusive. So next question is, based on a Korn Ferry latest research, it shows that organizations that embrace inclusivity are 87% more likely to make better decisions, such as what you mentioned also earlier.
Yeah. As in our research is completely supportive of that. Yeah.
What are the intangible factors that organization can look at in implementing and sustaining inclusivity?
I think the whole journey is, as I said, I think the 3 steps. Number one, leadership behavior. So we need to change that. And leadership behaviors, you change that is one thing, right? The sustenance will come through regular measurements. You will have to feed them through 360s, through performance measures, through your employee opinion surveys. You have to keep feeding them the information that are we progressing or are we staying there or are we dropping. So to sustain it, governance is the most important. Second is that don't see this purely as a soft journey. It is not okay, let's change our behaviors and let's do all the rah-rah things. It is a hard journey of changing processes. So how our meetings are run, how the way we structure our conversations, the way our decision making happens, the number of memos we have to sign sometimes for little things. So all of these processes are an enabler in driving inclusivity. So the bank's example that I was talking about, we've been working with them now for almost a year plus on driving some of these initiatives. It's a long list of initiatives and processes that need adjustment if we have to have a sustained journey of inclusion in the organization. What can we do to inculcate inclusivity? Okay, so first of all, I think I would need to kind of say something about this topic. Firmly, we don't believe that inclusivity is about an initiative. It is a programmatic change. So the last slide that I presented, it's not one initiative that will solve it. You will have to think through multiple initiatives, multiple interventions with cross section of employees is when you will see some magic happening. Otherwise, if you just purely see as if you purely start from one initiative, there is actually greater risk, and I would recommend the people to not take it up, because what you're doing is, if you are, let's say we create a lot of programs on just education. Okay, let's just talk about it. Let's just talk about it, and we tell them a lot of things, but no answers are given. Then we are raising hope, and people will feel even more dissatisfied and even more dismissed if they see this journey to not be sustained in terms of action. So I would say try to make this a programmatic approach if there is commitment on towards the journey, rather than one-off trainings or a one-off awareness sessions, which are good but difficult from an action perspective. I think Ali, we've taken most of the questions in the Q&A. Maybe we can pause for another minute and then I'll hand over to you. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. So thank you, Ridhima. I apologize for the viewers. I think I got disconnected for a bit there. If you have any questions, I think we'll take maybe one or two more before we proceed to close off the session. Feel free to write in. I think we'll wait for a couple of minutes if there are any more questions from the audience. All right. And in any case, if there are no other questions, I think maybe we can proceed to the next session. And as always, if you have any questions, maybe not during this webinar, feel free to write it into us via plct@bursamalaysia.com. I will relay those questions to Kincentric and we'll feed it back to the audience as well. Okay, so again, thank you, Ridhima, for taking the time to present us with on the topic of being inclusiveness. I think all of us have learned a lot from this session that you have shared with us here today. And to the participants, again, thank you for making the time to learn about this topic. And I think we hope that through the session that has been shared by Ridhima, all of you can start to take the first step in terms of incorporating the idea of being inclusive in your own organization. Before we wrap up and close off this session, just a quick reminder that if you are viewing this and you are not yet, and your organization is not yet part of the PLC transformation program, we have in front of you two QR codes. Number one on the left is for you to register as a participant of the PLC transformation program. And if you're already a PLC transformation program member, or even if you are not, on the right-hand side is a QR code for you to browse our guidebooks. We have, again, as I mentioned at the start of our webinar, we have 5 guidebooks, and the topic that we are covering today is a subtopic on the encompassing nation building. Have a look at our guidebooks, see what are areas that your organization can adopt and incorporate. And if you feel like there are areas under the PLC transformation program that you would like to learn more, or you like to understand more, feel free to drop us an email at plct@bursamalaysia.com, and we'll do our best to connect you with the right speaker to help address those concerns that you have. So again, thank you, Ridhima, for making the time here today. Appreciate you spending a valuable time to share with us the topic here today.
My pleasure always. Thank you so much, everybody, and have good luck for your journey, and feel free to reach out as Ali mentioned.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.